Our actual theme of the year, which we started last fall, was deepening our spiritual connection. Now, we created that theme last fall before the year started and created our bookmark with our monthly themes and our books. And little did we know when we chose deepening our spiritual connection that we would end up in a pandemic for 2020. And that pandemic has, of course, caused us to stay home. And it's quite an interesting connection to think that our intention was to deepen our spiritual connection. And now with staying home more, what a way to cause us to be less distracted, going here, going there, flitting here, flitting there, and causing us to be, emphasis on be, at home. It's a perfect opportunity to invite ourselves to deepen our spiritual connection. And for some of us, we may be very, very, very comfortable with that. And we can use this as an opportunity to spend and be with ourselves, inviting ourselves in to deepen that spiritual connection, that connection to the divine source and the divine love that lives deep within us, that never leaves us, that is always there, that is always whole, perfect, and complete. To turn towards that. And if we aren't comfortable with ourselves, it could cause many different feelings. For some, it may be loneliness, anxiety, emptiness, depression, and many other feelings. So it's an interesting time as we look at deepening our spiritual connection, meaning spending time with ourselves in this beingness. Now, our monthly theme is partnership with the intimate. Partnership with the intimate. And our book of the month, as you saw in our announcements, is Intimacy with God, the introduction to centering prayer. This book is written by Thomas Keating, who actually is a Christian monk. And of course, for Science of Mind, we know there are many paths to God, to that divine source within, to our higher self. And certainly Christianity is one way of being able to cultivate in these days. We are able to know that there are many spiritual texts and many ways to be inspired and guided into a deeper connection to our source. And I want to start with, when we say the word intimacy, of course, many people immediately think sex, but we're not thinking of that in this particular context. We're talking about a deeper connection, like a deeper connection with our friend. The definition of intimacy is a close familiarity, a closeness. And we may feel that we are close to ourselves by knowing our favorite meals and colors and routines and what we like and what we don't like. But in this case, we're talking the intimacy with our divine source, which is the ability to understand and have that space that Jack Fowler talked about, in that deep silence and peace, knowing that feeling in that space and being comfortable in that place. And that can be difficult because, a path to the intimate is not necessarily a known destination. For example, if I say I'm going to Lake Tahoe, I may know tactically what I need to do to pack up, to prepare, and to get to that destination. But when I say that I am putting my intention into becoming more intimate with spirit or God or that divine source, whichever you call it, It's not necessarily a known destination. The first step is, of course, declaring our intention and being willing to allow the distractions that we have in the outer world and even distractions in the inner world, like our racing mind, and allowing ourselves the space to say, I'm setting my intention to be here now. And there are many tools that can help us move to a more intimate connection, a connection that maybe we've experienced before, or maybe open ourselves to a new experience of what that intimacy may be like, to connect to our deeper beingness. And of course, our philosophy, the science of mind, has many tools. And these tools are important to have, important to know how to use, and of course, to practice them. And the question is, are we willing to do the work? Are we willing to sit down and to create space and time for ourselves? To not fill it with the distractions of perhaps the TV and the news, but to sit with ourselves in the time of centering in contemplation. So one of our spiritual tools, known across, again, the many philosophies of spirituality, is to read inspirational material. So I've been using both science of mind texts as well as intimacy with God to open to new ideas, to allow myself to expand my current understanding, to allow and open up to a space, to a dimension that maybe I've never been before, to continue to further the feeling, the experience of that deeper connection to the beingness that I am, the spirit that lives in this body. Now, in the preamble to the book, Thomas Keating says, we seek relationship with the ultimate reality through listening to God's first language. And I will say that again. We seek relationship with the ultimate reality through listening to God's first language, which he states as silence. Now, silence can be a little misleading because our minds are always filled with thoughts. And in today's society, for many of us, the anxiety of many racing thoughts. So I also would like to say that that silence that Thomas Keating is referring to is also a space of peace. That on the surface, there may be lots going on in the world. But can we move ourselves to a space that is this silence and peace, that we're willing to allow ourselves to be and to listen and to become aware of the deeper essence of being? There is no doubt that we live in a world of spin and distraction. And hence, we can find it rather boring to be with ourselves when we're so used to either A, being entertained, or B, allowing the external world or our internal human thoughts to chase after a quieter, deeper knowingness. And so with the music today, for instance, with the first song by Amber Darland, as well as with the song by Jack Fowler, music can also be a tool to help us sit and listen and open and to move into a listening space, allowing the music to move our hearts and move our minds, and allowing that essence, that energy to allow us to tune in to a different environment, if you will. We have in our society a compulsion to be doing, especially in Western society. and to think and to talk, to interrupt, to talk to convince rather than to listen. And I was thinking about another tool that we know about called mindfulness, and it's really a little bit mislabeled because mindful is typically what we are, is a mind full of a lot of racing thoughts. But mindfulness is really about tuning in and being present to our being. And this means to observe many aspects, perhaps, of our body. Many of us know the mindfulness of sitting and watching our breathing, listening to our breathing, becoming aware of that. Or one of my favorites is to tune in to the vibration of my body, to know where the end of my skin, the end of my nose, the end of my toes is. To develop a deeper awareness. Because God, or this divine source, this love, is always present. Sort of like going out in the middle of the day and the sun is always present. The clouds, the fire, the smoke may be disguising or putting a filter in, but the sun is always there. And on a sunny day, we may turn away from that sun and cast a shadow. And then we may get lost in the shadow. We may continue to focus on the shadow that we may see on the sidewalk. But all we need to do is turn towards the sun to see the light and the love and the truth of our being. And so it is when we sit and we contemplate and we allow ourselves to tune into our being, is we are tuning into that greater truth. As John Boyle's meditation mentioned today, it is by focusing our attention on the love that we are and the peace that exists more deeply than what society or what the external circumstances may be showing, to turn within, to know that there is a greater truth that lives, and to not let the fear and the chaos become what we stare at, like the shadow on the sidewalk, but rather allowing ourselves to use the tools to, again, get more deeply connected to our deeper sense of being. I also like to basically say, God is not necessarily like a lurker when we say that the presence is always with us, because God is not outside of us. That presence of love does exist as our being. It is the oneness that we are. I can speak about my heart and my lungs and my pancreas and my stomach, and it's all one body. And so it is as I turn to my presence of being. It's not as though somebody is always there on my shoulder like Jiminy Cricket or my consciousness. Instead, it is a presence that is always there, and I am just turning to become aware and listen differently, to tune deeper, to tune in deeper. So intimacy with God is not sitting down and saying, why doesn't God show up? Or maybe a different question might say, how can I miss God if God is always totally present? So this may seem like a strange metaphor, but it's very useful for me. In order to approach the intimacy with God, I have thought about it like sitting in the forest and having a deer all of a sudden come into my view. And when the deer comes into my view, it's not from a perspective of, now I need to move quickly, but the deer itself brings a peacefulness with it. And I know that I then need to be quiet and present and open, patient, and allowing myself with that open heart with an intention to connect. Many of you know that via your pets, a cat or a dog or some other pet that you may have, that they're very intuitive to knowing when you are happy and well and when you would need some love. And so I imagine that as I approach my intimacy with spirit, that it's like this deer that is approaching me, and I'm in this place of peace, and in this place of surrender, and in this place of open-heartedness, and in this place of trust that's not a trust that I've built by talking to the deer, but almost an intuitive trust of nature that goes deeper than the humanity aspect of myself. Now, the truth is that God is always speaking to us at every level of consciousness. You may be driving in your car and the song that you needed to hear may show up. That you may be talking to somebody and based on a question you've asked yourself, that person in an entirely different conversation have given you a clue or an answer to what you needed to hear. There are all these coincidences that show up, but really those coincidences are always there if we develop our awareness of the essence that is always there with us, giving us a sign. We can allow ourselves to develop this awareness. Now, this awareness can happen in multiple ways. You know how a song gets stuck in your head? It can become like a mantra. And as you're singing that song in your head, you're aware of the song and the tune and the words. And as you continue to sing that song, you become still a witness, another level of consciousness that witnesses that mantra. For those of us who practice transcendental meditation, we have a mantra. And that mantra begins to become, as we practice, a place that as we sit with that mantra, a way to have our mind be focused on an intention to be present. And yet we become very aware of the witness to that mantra, or the witness of the presence to that perhaps song. And then we become more attuned and more aware that that witness is always there, regardless of what's going on in the world. And in that space is where the peace and the silence that Jack Fowler or Thomas Keating is talking about. We become aware of the divine indwelling at the core of our being, regardless of what's going on for us. And that's where we want to center. And that's where we find the intimacy. Now, I'm going to touch lightly on the environment that we live in today. It's spoken everywhere about the divisiveness. And as you look at where the status of the world is, whether it's the pandemic, or whether it's the protests, or whether it's the election, whether it's the politics, fear does sell, just like showing people that there is a shadow on the sidewalk and they can all say that shadow is real. But the shadow is there because we are blocking the sun. And the truth, the principle, is that light, love, peace, power, beauty, joy, wisdom, harmony is always there as principles. And we know that love always prevails. As John Boyle's meditation said today, we know that when we focus on love, that all appearances of hate will dissolve by bringing our love into our expression and what we exude, which means being centered and being connected and knowing and feeling that love and allowing that light to shine. So for me, there's always so many intentions that before I begin prayer, that I sort of go through a Rolodex of intentions. Certainly for me and my family, for the community, our family at the Center for Spiritual Living, Chico, for the greater Chico community, for the expression of the healing of the pandemic, for the expression of that all of us choose to live in America as, yes, a democracy, and that really we have a common intention to live together in harmony, just like the rainbow with all of its colors demonstrates the beauty. So it is in the United States, that there is this diversity that is full of beauty. And so I'm now going to use one of our science of mind tools called spiritual mind treatment. And this treatment will be on the focus for a fair, just, and honest election. Because that is the true democracy that I believe that we all want. Because truth and justice is the true principle that we can live by, and that we can focus, place our intention on, and know that there by our intention and attention, where the focus goes, the energy flows. So if you'll join me here for a few moments of spiritual mind treatment. I come here now into this moment, opening my mind, letting go of all the thoughts that have come before, opening my heart, knowing deeply, knowing beyond my mind, knowing in the wholeness of my beingness, knowing in my heart, knowing from a spiritual, a mental, emotional, from all dimensions, that it is love that carries my spirit in this body forward. And I know this is true for all beings. I know that there is only one divine mind, one divine intelligence, one deep abiding love that is the basis of all physical expression. And so I come into this conscious awareness. I step into knowing and allowing this expression of my words to become the being of my living in this moment. I'm knowing that as I express this truth, that I am releasing all false beliefs, I'm releasing all false expressions, and opening to the greater love and the greater truth that continues to then expand in me, as me, and through me. And because this God, this divine source, this presence is omniscient, all-knowing, all-powerful, omnipresent, what is known here is known everywhere. And so I continue to focus my mind, my heart, my presence with this knowing of this truth and of this principle. And knowing that while fear may appear to be for sale, we know that love dissipates. Love dissipates fear. Love dissipates hate. We listen with our being, knowing that doubt is released for the faith of the truth and the principles that have stood before time. The principles that stand here and exude beyond all appearances. I'm knowing that by the divine nature of our beingness, that light always overcomes darkness. A flashlight enters a dark room and the light always overcomes the darkness. So I know the truth of light and love that continues to dissipate all false beliefs, allowing for the truth, the light of love, to be revealed in my being and in the being of all those that I'm doing this treatment, in the beingness of all those that are open to this spiritual mind treatment. Again, knowing that what I know right here and now is known for all those listening and even those who are just tuned in to want to know and reveal the truth of our being, knowing and revealing the intention of the United States of America. I'm knowing that as I've moved my consciousness and developed this faith and trust in knowing that these principles of justice, these principles of fairness, the principles of truth will continue to reveal themselves. That I turn away from that which is false and disappears with time, and I place myself in the faith of that which is everlasting, the everlasting love, the everlasting truth, the everlasting revelation of the oneness that we are. Knowing that as we continue to work together, to allow for a greater being as individuals, a greater being as a community, a greater being that knows our higher and divine order. The divine order which reveals itself through the intelligence of spirit that is known and could not, the essence of our physicalness could not be without the divine law, the divine order that reveals itself through all creation. As we move from summer to fall, fall to spring, and spring to summer, knowing that such order continues to allow for the falling away of that which no longer serves, and opening to the greater revelation and truth, opening to the presentation and representation of spring, to the new life, to the new evolution, to the revealing of the greater truth that allows for harmony, allows for the connection of knowing our truth, that together we are living as one organism, one earth, one life that lives, loves, and expresses the divine nature, known to all men deep within their being. And so I call forth that awareness, that expression, that knowingness, that exuding essence of the divine living through each one of us. I call it forward. I bless it. I give great gratitude in knowing this truth, in revealing this truth, standing in faith and knowing that it reveals itself because it is the truth. And so I release it knowing that my words have power, that these words have already been expressed, have already created, and are ready to be demonstrated in this physical world. I release them and let them be so. And together we say, and so it is.